What's going on, guys? Thank you so much for tuning in to Late Hoops. Today's video, we're going to be discussing some players I think need to be moved come or before the trade deadline, some for more urgent reasons than others, but all in all, it's time to trade these NBA players. For starters, number one in today's video is D'Angelo Russell. D'Lo is averaging a solid 17 and 16 for the Timberwolves, but has clearly had some locker room issues with this team this season and has just recently unfollowed the Wolves on all social media. I personally don't think that's that big of a deal, but in 2023, we live in a world where every move you make, you get scrutinized for it, and it's the truth. A subtle move like this can mean a lot to a franchise and an organization. As trade talks have heated up, he's expressed his opinions on the situation at hand by saying, quote, "You either take advantage of me and my ability or F up the opportunity with me. It's as simple as that." So it's safe to say he didn't mince his words in this discussion. While once upon a time, Timberwolves fans, and honestly, I'm not a Wolves fan, but myself included, they dreamed of having a big three come together of Karl Anthony Towns and D'Lo and Devin Booker, obviously like we saw on the magazine cover, the Slam cover, but it's about 3 years later now since that trade has occurred for D'Angelo Russell, and the experiment may be over, which leads us to ask, where does D'Angelo Russell fit? The front runner and the only team we're going to be discussing right now is the Miami Heat. The only problem is the money. D'Angelo's on an expiring contract right now, and he's making almost, or a little over actually, $30 million a year. But when has money not been a problem in this life? The Miami Heat would most likely include Kyle Lowry in this trade to make the money match. Pretty much every single trade rumor I've seen has included Kyle Lowry in this, but I'm almost more than certain that the Wolves aren't going to just straight up trade D'Lo for Kyle Lowry, even if he hasn't been pleasant in the locker room. D'Angelo, he is having the most efficient season of his career, and it's on less volume, but his value as a player is at an all-time high since his days on the Brooklyn Nets when he was an all-star. With the contracts being so close, but the player value being so far apart, I really don't see this trade happening unless they add other players into the equation. I drew something up like this in the Trade Finder on ESPN's Trade Finder, but even then the Miami Heat would have to be adding some draft picks to make this a more viable option and a more viable trade. This is kind of like a rock and a hard place with D'Angelo Russell, where both sides, D'Angelo and Minnesota, seem to want to move on, but finding a suitable place for him to go is going to be tough. I mean, with an expiring contract, though, they're going to have to make a move before the trade deadline unless they just want him to sign elsewhere. All in all, whether I think it's the Miami Heat or not, I think, like I said, D'Lo has to go. But while we're on the topic of the Miami Heat, let's talk about the second player that I believe that needs to be traded this season, and that's Duncan Robinson. Out of the 28 games he's played this season, Duncan has not started one time. Even when he was showing signs of success in the playoffs last year, Eric Spoelstra still decided to bench him, and I understand that he's been injured this year, but his three-point percentage is at an all-time low, and his scoring output has been at an all-time low, and I think it's time that the Heat understand that they made a mistake in the first place signing him on the extension that he did. And that's not to say that he's a bad NBA player or a bad player at all, but he's a player averaging 6 points a night to get paid nearly $100 million throughout his contract. In my eyes, there's a ton of teams out there who could use the shooting that Duncan brings to the game, but there's only a few teams out there who would be willing to do a trade with that dollar sign attached to him. I think the Lakers jump out to me as the favorites. They could possibly use this as an opportunity to move on from Russ and bring in some shooting pieces plus another guard with some championship experience in Kyle Lowry, or the Mavericks, who desperately could use shooting, could trade Reggie Bullock, who has regressed from the shooter that he once was, and a really solid backup center in JaVale McGee, which the Heat could definitely use. I'm getting really sick and tired of seeing Jimmy Butler play the power forward position. You could possibly even start JaVale and put Bam back at the power forward position. I don't know. I know that sounds crazy to play someone who's above the height of 6'6" at your front court position, but hey, just hear me out. This isn't a trade that makes either team immediately contenders, whether that's the Mavs or the Heat, or the Lakers, you know, wherever he may end up. However, I think it's a trade that definitely helps both teams out. I could also see the Hawks, if they wanted to switch things up, they could try, you know, to throw some picks in there and trade Bojan Bogdonavich. While Bogdan is a much more versatile shooter than Duncan, you know, being able to create his own shot off the dribble, I think that sometimes that takes away from what they have going on in Atlanta with DeJounte and Trae Young being the primary ball handlers. Bogdan has not started a single game this season for the Atlanta Hawks, and I think Duncan would slide really nicely into the system as just a catch-and-shoot machine. Speaking of great shooters, the next and last person on our list is Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, like I said, this is going to be the last player we talk about on this list. I was going to speak about John Collins because I do think he will be traded in the near future, but I think he's going to be staying put in Atlanta until they decide with what they're going to do and go forward with Coach Nate McMillan. But as for Bojan, every single team in the NBA would love to have a guy like Bojan on their roster. He shoots, he rebounds, he isn't greedy, and this season he's shown he can be a vocal leader on the court, both dishing it out and receiving it being the constructive criticism. He's averaging 21, 3 and 3, and he's making just shy of $20 million a year, which makes his contract a little hard but pretty movable. Obviously, on any other roster than Detroit, we'll see a slight drop off in production as he won't be taking nearly as many shots as he does in Detroit, but I think teams like the Lakers, the Mavericks, and the Suns would be my favorites for him to land. Again, all other teams in the league would love to have him, but I think these are three teams that are seriously going to be pursuing this man once, you know, the Detroit Pistons come forward and make it clear that he is available for trade. If you're the Suns, you could try offering something like an unhappy Jay Crowder, a younger Landry Shamet, and a first-round pick for Bojan. I think that offer is pretty fair both ways. Again, it's hard to put value on someone like Bojan because his skill set is worth a lot in today's NBA, but his stats are a bit inflated because he's in Detroit taking a lot of shots and his usage rate's very high. If you're a Mavs fan, or you are obviously in the front office of Dallas, you could try offering draft capital plus Josh Green and Davis Bertans. Davis Bertans, the Latvian laser, he was a great little experience, but I feel like he is either really on or really off, and the Mavericks would just enjoy the consistency of that Bojan supplies. As you guys can see, ESPN predicts that this would result in 8+ wins for the Mavs in the regular season. I think that if you're Dallas, you should do almost anything in your power to acquire this man. He is a ultimate and the perfect teammate for a guy like Luka Doncic, and I think he would really fit well alongside him. But what do you guys think? Which of these three players do you see getting moved first? If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a like and let me know your opinions in the comments below. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. Peace.